Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're venturing into the world of green architecture.
Okay.
We're drawing insights from the book Green Architecture, The Art of Architecture in the Age of Ecology, edited by Philip Giudidio, and it features a lot of James Wine's thinking.
A fascinating source.
Yes, and you, our listener, shared excerpts from this book. So our mission today is to really uncover the most important ideas about, truly blending architecture and ecology.
Going beyond just the surface level sustainability talk.
Exactly. Beyond just the basics. Okay, let's get into it.
Well, it's interesting how this book immediately frames green architecture. It's not just presented as like a passing trend.
No.
It's shown as a really fundamental shift in how we even understand buildings. For such a long time, architecture, or at least a dominant strain of it, treated nature as something separate, maybe even something to be, well, conquered or controlled.
Right, kept at bay.
Yeah. And the core shift here in what the book calls green architecture is moving away from that very human-centered, maybe nature-dominating view.
Towards one that's much more ecocentric, where the goal is integration with nature, not separation from it.
That makes sense. And the book specifically contrasts this with that traditional view. Maybe best summed up by Le Corbusier's famous idea, right? The house as a machine for living in.
Powered by industry,
Yeah.
that iconic phrase.
Exactly. But this green architecture perspective asks us to sort of flip that entirely. Instead of the house being the machine, what if we see the earth itself as the ultimate system?
The ultimate machine, maybe, but in a living sense,
Yeah.
our shared habitat.
Precisely. And here's a key point the book makes. It highlights this growing Earth-centric awareness, really picking up steam, it says, in the 1990s, emphasizing how deeply interconnected everything is: our construction, the environment, our lives. So the fundamental insight is this complete reversal almost of that machine for living idea.
Yes, exactly. Seeing buildings as part of a much larger living system.
Right. And, if we take a step back, while the term sustainability feels very current, the basic idea of building in harmony with the earth isn't entirely new, is it?
No, not at all. The book touches on this too.
Think way back. Ancient builders, well, they had to be sustainable, often just out of sheer necessity.
True.
They had to respond directly to the local climate, use materials that were right there. These practical, earth-conscious decisions were just, well, they were just part of building shelter.
It's almost like modernism, with its focus on industrial progress and universal solutions, kind of forgot some of those really basic, essential lessons learned over centuries.
Yeah, perhaps overlooked or maybe deliberately set aside in favor of this new industrial power.
Well, the book brings in Lloyd Wright here as a really key figure, a pioneer championing what he called organic architecture.
Ah, yes, right. His idea is crucial here. The core insight from Wright, as the book presents it, is this concept of buildings being of the land, not just placed on it.
Of the land. I like
Yeah.
that distinction.
Yeah. His organic architecture really envisioned buildings as like extensions of their environment.
So what did that mean practically?
Well, it meant a deep respect for the natural contours, the shape of the land itself. It meant using materials sourced locally as much as possible and designing the building to meet fundamental human needs, light, shelter, warmth, connection to the outside, but doing it in harmony with the surrounding nature.
So the building feels like it belongs there, organically.
Exactly. Not just an object dropped onto the site, but something that grew out of it, in a way.
Okay, so we have Wright laying some important groundwork. Then the book talks about the environmental movement of the 1960s and 70s.
Right, a major cultural shift.
You can almost feel that growing public awareness about pollution, resource depletion, starting to really push architects to think differently, can't you?
Absolutely. That period definitely amplified these concerns massively. The book even mentions, sort of playfully, these passionate individuals, sometimes called eco-freaks,
Yeah.
who were deeply, deeply worried about humanity's impact on the planet.
And that wider societal concern inevitably started filtering into architecture.
Inevitably, it led to a much stronger focus on designing more responsibly. Specifically, trying to conserve energy, use resources more wisely. This is where the more, let's say, technical side of sustainability really started to gain traction in design.
Okay, so responsible resource use becomes a bigger focus.
Yeah.
And this then brings us to something maybe a bit deeper, more philosophical, the idea of deep ecology.
Yes, championed by Ernest Ness.
How does the book connect that philosophy to architecture? And the key thing with deep ecology it goes beyond just fixing immediate problems, right? It's not just about efficiency metrics.
Exactly. Deep ecology, as the book explains it, isn't just about, say, tackling pollution or saving energy, though those are important. It really emphasizes the inherent worth, the intrinsic value of all living things.
Regardless of their usefulness to humans.
Precisely, regardless of their utility to us. So applying this thinking to architecture means questioning our often unconscious human-centered view of the world.
That anthropocentrism.
Right, that anthropocentrism. And striving for a much more profound understanding of our place within the larger ecological web when we design and build things.
Wow. Okay, so it's definitely not just about, sticking some solar panels on a roof and calling it green.
Not if you're embracing this deeper perspective, no.
It's a fundamentally different way of seeing our role as creators, as builders on this planet. Now, the book, as you said, really illustrates this isn't just one thing. It shows a huge variety of architectural responses. Green clearly isn't a monolithic style.
Oh, not at all. That's one of the most striking things from the excerpts, the sheer diversity of approaches they showcase.
Like what kind of things?
Well, you see buildings that seem to almost emerge right out of the landscape. Think earth shelter designs or structures integrated cleverly into hillsides.
Blurring the lines.
Yeah, blurring the lines. Then there's really innovative use of natural materials, extensive use of wood or rammed earth constructions, showcasing their inherent qualities.
And I imagine plants and actual green spaces become part of the architecture itself?
Absolutely. Rooftop gardens, living walls. They're not just tacked on as decoration. They're presented as integral elements, part of the building's function, its aesthetic, its ecosystem.
Right. Integrated.
And the book also highlights projects designed specifically to tackle certain environmental issues, things like sophisticated water management systems or buildings aiming for complete energy independence.
And then there are the more out there concepts, the really forward-thinking stuff.
Yeah, definitely. There's an exploration of some pretty radical ideas, fully self-sustaining habitats, even conceptual things like machines designed to actively repair environmental damage, like the ozone layer.
Wow, okay. Visionary stuff.
These really push us to think about architecture's potential to be not just less harmful, but actively positive for the environment. The book mentions specific architects, too, like Emilio Ambasz, whose work often beautifully fuses building and landscape. Peter Noever is mentioned, the group's site known for their very conceptual, almost provocative work, and also significant figures like Jourda and Perraudin, who've been pioneers in environmentally conscious design for a long time.
It sounds like woven through all these examples, the book also touches on a potential tension. A bit of a split, maybe.
How so?
Between a more, let's say, ecotech approach, focusing heavily on technology and efficiency.
Right, the engineering side.
And a more artistic, or the book apparently calls a phenomenological approach to green design. One that's maybe more about the feeling, the experience, the connection.
That's a really important point. The core insight isn't just about building efficiently, is it? It's also about creating places that feel ecologically connected, that resonate on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Exactly. The book seems to implicitly suggest that while technology is obviously crucial, purely technological solutions might fall short if they lack that deeper ecological understanding, and importantly, that aesthetic or artistic integration.
So true green architecture, in this view, is aiming for something more holistic.
I think so. It's aiming for a complete harmony, recognizing how interconnected everything is. The building's form, its function, its environmental impact, and crucially, the human experience within it.
Going beyond just ticking the boxes for energy ratings.
Definitely. It's about a richer, more integrated approach.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up our deep dive into these excerpts, it really seems that green architecture, as this book presents it, is, well, it's much more than just a checklist of features or technologies.
Absolutely. It comes across as a really multifaceted movement.
Yeah, and one that fundamentally challenges some of our most basic assumptions about building, about how we inhabit this planet.
I think the main takeaway is that it's this deep, incredibly varied exploration of how to bring ecological principles right into the heart of the art of building.
Right, into the art itself.
It pushes us to move beyond those traditional, often human-first ways of thinking, and instead to actively seek a more harmonious and responsible relationship between what we create and the natural world.
Which leads us perfectly to a final thought for everyone listening. Considering this incredible range of approaches to green architecture we touched on today, from the earth shelter to the high-tech, from the pragmatic to the philosophical, What does green architecture truly mean in our world right now?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. And how can these kinds of ideas, some old, some new, some radical, inspire us to build in ways that are not only more ecologically conscious, but also create genuinely beautiful, meaningful spaces for the future?
And maybe, what responsibility do we all have, architects, clients, citizens, to actually move beyond just conventional building practices?